Is that, I don't want to dwell on the statement, but there's some statements that seem like they're cliche. I mean, they're things that have been, used before in other climes, or, I don't know how to put it, distilled. They're not original to these people, and if they're used in that manner, proverbs, whatever, will they be allowed, even if they carry, they'll be apt in certain meanings?
If they imply violence, if they use metaphors that imply a crisis, violence, and chaos, then certainly they should be sanctioned.
Well, we're dealing with it would seem that what we have on our hands is an extremely combustible situation. That's what Professor Bolaji Akinyemi has noted in his letter. He says that arms are being gathered. He also said that it would seem that whichever way the pendulum swings, we still will be in trouble. And he says we don't need a prophet to tell us that. Do you share his sentiments?
Not exactly. I know that in every election, we have this sort of situation. Every election in this country, we hear people gathering arms and, they get ready to fight. And I'm glad that people are talking now and that people are very conscious of the possibility, and so we try everything to avoid it. But the security must be tight. As always, security is paramount in all these elections. And, young people who are used by these leaders should realize that it's not in their interest to be those used. But I think that the leaders themselves have to be held accountable. They're the ones that you can easily identify.
Who holds accountable the leaders now? The authorities or
the authorities,
the people?
The authorities. For instance, if you find somebody who is going to snatch a ballot box, that person is answerable to some leader. So you trace it to where that's coming from, and they're all prosecuted. They all must suffer. It is not a situation where you just deal with the young person, usually, who is used, to come and commit havoc, and then you leave it at that.
Do we even
and you
have
don't go to the leader.
Do we have that kind of capacity, in the sense that last elections, INEC said they had over 80,000 electoral offenders, and they were looking for how to prosecute those people? Do you think we have the capacity, if we're looking at that number, as people who are going to be offended in this?
We have the capacity, because those 80,000 people probably have about just 3 or 4 leaders. That's exactly what I'm saying. That's where you go. It is not just those people that you see causing havoc. It's the people who sent them.
Is that allowed in law?
Somebody is behind them. Somebody is financing them. Somebody is promoting that, and that's the person. You see, this is the problem with this country, that we don't prosecute people who have power, who have influence. Until people begin to go to jail, whether they were former presidents or not, then they will realize that things must change.
And now about that preparedness in terms of the conduct of politicians and the electorate, what is practicable? Because some have said, look, reining in or signing a memorandum of understanding doesn't work anywhere. At best, it could just be maybe a moral document, and so there's got to be a lot more. You are in this, a politician. What is the practicable thing to do?
I don't think the issue is what is practicable. It is what must be done. It is not enough to sign an agreement. We have a lot of good rules and regulations in this country. We have a lot of good laws, as good as any country in the world. The problem is enforcement. We must enforce the law. Anybody who's importing arms, doesn't matter who he or she is, should be prosecuted. Simple as that. And right now, we should be going after the people who are bringing in arms, because they are bringing in arms. We don't wait till they use those arms before we start looking for them.
Yeah, but do they have to wait to be told to go after people who are bringing in arms?
Well, look, a lot of people, agencies don't do their work. A lot of them must be held accountable. Part of our reason for talking like this, coming on shows like this, is to alert the public, is to get it going, and let them know that we are watching, and we are determined that nobody is going to disrupt this country and create a crisis. And nobody is above the law. Once we begin to realize that, then I think we will have a much more peaceful country. Even the primaries, all of the problems we had in our primaries, for instance, in Lagos State, was simply because some leaders felt they were above the law. The regulations were clear, and they flaunted them. And then that created the chain of reaction. People start fighting, people start arguing.
And none of those leaders were arrested?
Well, because they were not sanctioned. And then it will lead to problems. So if people think they can get away with the law, or they can get away with anything, they're above the law, then they will do it. So we must begin to hold people accountable.
So the police hold one of the keys here, because if this were the case as it played out in your primaries, at the larger scene, it would be a different kettle of fish entirely.
This is why we insisted that if things are not done properly by the party, then individuals have the right to go to court. And right now, we should be. In fact, if there are people in my party who know what is going on with this importation of arms, they should speak out. And if you are guilty of importing arms yourself, you better watch out, because you're going to go to jail. This is what we must do. If we don't do that, then all hell can break loose.
How do we know that they're going to go to jail? Did anybody go to jail 4 years ago?
There must be a first time. We must begin to realize that if we don't begin to prosecute people for political crimes, then we have a problem. And we have
Mark, I asked you a question about INEC's statement that they had 80,000 electoral offenders in the last election, and they're looking for how to prosecute them. Our courts are somewhat jammed with cases, criminal cases and all of that. We see have election tribunals that are sitting back and forth, and you say we need to prosecute. So how do we go? Do we need to set up an electoral court?
If we need to do that, yes. You see, because what you're saying is, should we then say because there are too many of them, we should let them go? The prison is full, we should just open up the gates and let prisoners go home? No. But I said, you can make this easier. You don't have, look, chasing 80,000 people is not the solution. It is looking for, as they do when they're chasing criminals, drug traffickers. In America, for instance, you don't go after the small ones, you go after the source, the person who's funding them, the person who's behind, the brain behind this scheme. And that's what we must do. So we won't have 80,000. 80,000 is chasing shadows. They're chasing everybody but the person that they really should go after. So we should go after the big guns, and then that will teach people a lesson.
What do we do, or how do we approach this win at all cost mentality that politicians have?
Well, I think that's part of it, which is to say that if you think that if you don't win, you are going to create a problem, then you will have a lot of problems to deal with. You're not above the law. We allow people to do things, get away with it, and then we don't prosecute, and nobody says anything. I feel that in 2011, certain leaders that are now roaming the streets and are now even contesting for presidency should have been in jail for the things they said. Very irresponsible, and has created chaos. Look, as an adult, there are things you do not say. If you say it, imagine somebody coming to you and say, if, take my case as a teacher, you say, if you don't pass me, I'm going to attack you. I'm going to kidnap your daughter, Once you get that kind of threat, you need to do something about it. Just don't keep quiet. So if somebody is threatening this nation and saying that if I don't win this election, the dog and the baboon will be soaked in blood, that person needs to be prosecuted. And everybody should realize that a person who has that kind of mentality is actually dangerous for this nation.
All right, Mr. Adetokunbo Pearse is a former governorship aspirant in the Lagos PDP. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thanks for having me.
We're back in just a moment. Join us again.